There is an island on this planet that has existed, named and charted, since the year 1739. And in nearly 300 years, no human being has ever lived there. Not for a season, not for a winter, not even for a single uninterrupted year. Nobody has ever been born there. Nobody has ever been buried there. In the entire recorded history of our species, this island has never once been someone's home. It sits in the South Atlantic Ocean, closer to Antarctica than to any inhabited place on Earth. The nearest land of any kind is over 1,600 kilometers away, and that land is Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, which is itself uninhabited. You could draw a circle 1,600 kilometers wide around this island and find nothing inside it. No coastline, no ship route, no other rock breaking the surface of the sea. It is, by every measurement that matters, the most isolated island on the surface of this planet. 93% of it is buried under glacier. The cliffs that ring its coast rise 500 meters in places, sheer rock and ice, with nowhere for a boat to land. There is no harbor. There has never been a harbor. There is exactly one place on the entire island where a person can step from the sea onto solid ground. A narrow shelf of black volcanic rubble created by a landslide in the 1950s that did not even exist when the island was first discovered. This is Bouvet Island. And the story of what has happened here: the lifeboat found empty on its shore, the unexplained flash of light recorded by an American satellite, the decades it spent vanishing and reappearing on every map that tried to hold it, is one of the strangest stories that the ocean has ever kept. This is the story of the island that nobody has ever truly reached. On the 1st of January, 1739, a French naval officer named Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier was searching for something that did not exist. He was looking for Terra Australis, a vast southern continent that European geographers had theorized must exist to balance the land masses of the north. He never found that continent. Nobody ever would, because it was never there. But on that first morning of 1739, through heavy fog, his crew sighted land, a dark, jagged shape rising out of the southern ocean, ringed with ice. Bouvet could not land. The seas were too violent, the cliffs too sheer. He could not even sail completely around what he had found, so he had no way of knowing if it was an island or the edge of the continent he was searching for. He named the point he could see Cape Circumcision for the religious feast day on which he had found it, and he sailed on. And then he recorded the coordinates incorrectly, not by a small margin, by degrees. Enough that any ship that followed his charts to find the island again would sail through open ocean and find nothing at all. For the next 69 years, the island Bouvet had seen simply disappeared. Other expeditions searched the coordinates in his log and found empty sea. Some concluded the island did not exist, that Bouvet had seen an iceberg, or a trick of fog and light, or nothing at all. The discovery slipped slowly out of the maps that had briefly included it. In 1808, a British whaling captain named James Lindsay found it again. Far from where Bouvet's coordinates said it should be, the island that had vanished for nearly 70 years reappeared in the wrong place, exactly where it had always actually been. That pattern, discovery, error, disappearance, rediscovery, would define Bouvet Island for the next century. Sealing ships occasionally landed in the 1800s. The British raised a flag in 1825, in a landing whose logs were so poorly recorded that the claim itself became disputed. The Americans claimed a landing in 1823 that most historians now consider to never have happened at all. Even the island's neighbors were unreliable. For decades, charts showed a second island, Thompson Island, supposedly 70 kilometers to the northeast. Sailors reported sighting it as late as 1893. It does not exist. The ocean at that location is over 2,000 meters deep. Thompson Island was what geographers now call a phantom island, a place that was seen and recorded and believed in, and was never actually there. In a part of the ocean this remote, the line between what is real and what sailors believed they saw through fog and exhaustion and the strange tricks of polar light became, for almost 2 centuries, impossible to draw with any confidence. Bouvet Island, at least, turned out to be real, but being real did not make it any easier to reach. For most of its recorded history, nobody particularly wanted Bouvet Island. It had no strategic value. It had no resources worth extracting. It had no harbor that would let a ship approach safely, let alone build something permanent. Sealing crews in the 19th century occasionally landed when conditions allowed, took what fur seals they could reach, and left. It was not until the 1920s that any nation took the question of ownership seriously. And even then, the motivation was narrow. Norway was expanding its whaling operations across the Southern Ocean and wanted a base of operations in this part of the Atlantic. In December 1927, a Norwegian expedition raised their flag on the island. The British, who had a disputed and poorly documented claim from a century earlier, considered the matter not worth the diplomatic effort and formally withdrew their objection in 1929. On the 27th of February, 1930, Bouvet Island was annexed by royal decree. It became Norwegian territory, not as a full part of the Kingdom of Norway, but as a dependency, administered by the Polar Department of the Ministry of Justice in Oslo, 12,700 kilometers away. Almost a third of the circumference of the Earth separates the island from the government that owns it. The whaling station Norway had imagined building was never constructed. The cliffs made it impossible. The seas made it impossible. By the time anyone seriously investigated establishing a permanent presence, it had become clear that Bouvet Island was simply not survivable as a base of any kind. In 1955, something changed the island itself. A landslide, triggered by some combination of seismic activity and the constant freeze-thaw stress on the volcanic rock, created a small shelf of rubble on the northwest coast. It was the first piece of solid, accessible ground the island had ever had. The Norwegians named it Nyroisa, New Mound. It remains to this day the only place on Bouvet Island where a person can step directly from a boat or helicopter onto land without scaling a glacier or a cliff face. In 1971, Norway declared the entire island and its surrounding waters a nature reserve. No development, no extraction, no permanent habitation, ever, by anyone. The legal status of Bouvet Island today is the formal, written acknowledgement of what the geography had already decided a long time ago. This place was not built to hold people. In April of 1964, a South African Antarctic expedition approached Bouvet Island to conduct survey work. They landed at Nyroisa, the only place they could land, and in a small lagoon at the edge of the new lava shelf, they found a lifeboat. It was wooden. It had oars still resting inside it. Components of a mast lay nearby, as if someone had begun to rig the boat for a longer voyage and had not finished. There were no markings on the hull, no name, no registration number, no flag, no insignia, nothing that identified what vessel it had come from or what nation it belonged to. And there was no one in it. No bodies, no remains, no supplies beyond a tin of biscuits, swollen and rusted, shut by the salt air. No note, no log. Nothing that explained how a lifeboat, clearly launched in an emergency, clearly meant to carry survivors away from a sinking or stranded vessel, had ended up empty on the shore of the most isolated island on Earth. The South African team could not determine its origin. Best estimates, based on the construction and the wear pattern on the wood, suggested it had likely come from a fishing or whaling vessel, the kind of ship that worked these waters in the decades before, often without the kind of detailed registration records that a passenger liner or naval ship would have kept. Whoever had been in that boat had either reached the island and not survived what came next, or had been swept away from it before they ever set foot on land, or had abandoned it for reasons that left no trace at all. Nobody knows. Nobody will ever know. The lifeboat sat in that lagoon for years, slowly decaying in the relentless salt spray and freezing temperatures, a physical object with no story attached to it, on an island where almost nothing happens and almost nothing is ever explained. It is, in the plainest sense, a ghost story without a ghost. Just an empty boat on an empty shore at the edge of the emptiest stretch of ocean on the planet. And it would not be the last unexplained thing this island produced. On the 22nd of September, 1979, at 2:53 in the morning, an American Vela satellite, designed specifically to detect the signature of nuclear weapons tests anywhere on Earth, recorded a double flash of light. The location was a stretch of open ocean between Bouvet Island and the Prince Edward Islands, one of the most remote and least surveilled patches of water on the planet. The Vela satellites had been built for exactly one purpose: to catch the unmistakable double flash signature of a nuclear detonation, fast, bright pulse, followed by a slower secondary glow, a pattern that does not occur in ordinary natural events. They had successfully detected every confirmed nuclear test since their launch. This reading matched that signature precisely. What followed was decades of investigation, speculation, and official ambiguity that has never been fully resolved. Some analysts concluded it was a clandestine nuclear test, possibly conducted jointly by South Africa and Israel, two nations with nuclear ambitions and a documented history of cooperation, using the extreme isolation of the Southern Ocean specifically because no one would be there to witness it. Others argued it was a meteoroid strike on the satellite itself, producing a false signature. Later, scientific reviews have leaned toward the meteoroid explanation, but never with complete certainty, and declassified documents on the subject remain incomplete. It has become known as the Vela incident. And to this day, no government has offered a conclusive, fully corroborated account of what happened in that stretch of ocean on that September morning. What makes it relevant to the story of Bouvet Island is not that the island caused it, or hosted it, or even necessarily witnessed it. It is that the event happened here, at this exact coordinate on the map, because this was one of the only places on Earth remote enough, unwatched enough, that whatever happened could happen without a single human witness. The same isolation that has kept Bouvet Island empty for nearly 3 centuries is the isolation that may have allowed, on one night in 1979, something to occur that the rest of the world still cannot fully explain. Emptiness, it turns out, is not the same thing as nothing happening. It is simply nothing being seen. No human has ever made a home on Bouvet Island. But the island is not, and has never been, lifeless. Fur seals haul themselves onto the narrow black beaches at Neuroisa, the same shelf of volcanic rubble where the lifeboat once rested, where every human visit to this island for the last 70 years has begun and ended. Penguins nest on the rocks. The island has been designated an important bird area, home to snow petrels, black-browed albatrosses, and Antarctic prions, who use this isolated outcrop as one of the only solid platforms for hundreds of kilometers in any direction. Killer whales and humpback whales pass close to shore, drawn by the rich cold waters of the Southern Ocean. Mosses and lichens cling to the 7% of the island not buried under glacier, surviving in a climate that averages just below freezing year-round, where summer temperatures rarely exceed a few degrees above zero. Beneath the ice, the island is still, technically, alive in another sense. It sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the same volcanic system that built Iceland and Tristan da Cunha, and the volcanic island of Surtsey. Bouvet's last known eruption was roughly 4,000 years ago. The rock, just 30 centimeters below the surface scientists have measured, sits at 25 degrees Celsius, warm, geologically speaking, even as the surface above it remains locked in permanent ice. A volcano, slowly dying, wrapped entirely in glacier, with warm stone hidden just beneath the cold. Since 1977, Norway has maintained an automated weather station on the island, unmanned, requiring no permanent human presence, transmitting data back to scientists who have never set foot on the ground it measures. In 2006, an earthquake weakened the structure's foundation. A winter storm finished what the earthquake started, sweeping the station's remains out to sea. Even the island's machines, it turned out, could not hold on here indefinitely. Olav Peak, the island's summit at 780 meters, was not successfully climbed by any human being until 2012. Not in 1739, not in the 1800s, not during the Norwegian annexation in the 1920s. It took 273 years from the island's discovery for a person to stand on its highest point. Today, the only people who come to Bouvet Island at all are scientists on rare research expeditions, and an even smaller number of amateur radio operators, a community that treats this island as one of the rarest and most coveted locations on Earth to transmit a signal from, precisely because almost no one ever has. Their visits last days, sometimes weeks, never longer. The island has never once hosted a single uninterrupted year of human presence in nearly 300 years of recorded history. It remains to this day the most isolated island on Earth, closer to the empty white interior of Antarctica than to any place where another human being is currently standing. The lifeboat is gone now, lost to decades of salt and storm. The weather station is gone, swept into the sea by the same forces it was built to measure. What remains is the rock, the glacier, the seals, and the petrels, and a silence that has held since long before anyone on Earth had a way to record what silence like this actually sounds like. There is something quietly unsettling about a place that has been known to us for 3 centuries and has still never once been someone's home. We tend to assume that enough time, enough technology, enough determination eventually puts a flag and a family and a name on every corner of the map. Bouvet Island is the proof that this assumption is wrong. Some places do not yield. Not because no one has tried hard enough, but because the geography itself has made the terms of the negotiation clear from the very beginning. Perhaps that is the quiet value of a place like this. Not what it offers us, because it offers almost nothing, but what it reminds us of. That the Earth still contains places that have never been fully claimed, fully explained, or fully tamed. And that this, in a world where almost everything else has been mapped and measured and monetized, might be the rarest thing left. We want to hear from you. If you could stand on Olav Peak for just 1 hour, the most isolated summit on Earth, 300 years after its discovery, only climbed for the first time in 2012. Would you want to? Or is there something about a place this untouched that should simply be left alone? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. If this film made you think differently about isolation and about the places that still resist us, please subscribe to the channel to join us on our future journeys, and share it with someone who would find that question as strange and as wonderful as we do.